Hi, this is Leni from Indivisible, Illinois. This is the first live stream that we are bringing to you. We are going to do a series of these starting today, every Thursday at 7 o'clock until Election Day in Illinois. I want to welcome you. For those of you who don't know who Indivisible Illinois is, we formed together after 2016 elections, after we marched maybe for the first time with women's marches around the nation. Maybe we were in DC, maybe we were in Chicago. I know I was with at least 10,000 Illinoisans that marched in DC after Trump was elected. And we came home wanting to do something locally. I started a group in the 9th district and discovered that I had some great representatives that represented me in government, including my congressperson, Jan Schakowsky, and my two senators, Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth. And at the time, we were learning as we went along. A lot of us were not politically active before 2016. But we felt compelled to get involved and to do what we could. And one of the things that we learned was we have a voice in government, and that's through our representatives. We elect them, and come to find out that there were some officials that weren't doing as good of a job as we wanted them to. We knew that we wanted to hold Trump accountable, but we also found that our governor was not at the time doing a great job. So we helped to get out the vote, and we got J.B. Pritzker elected. We're really glad that we have him in office right now. We know that he has a very high rating polled, and we found that over 77% of us agree that he's doing a fantastic job in this moment of this pandemic. We also were involved with getting others elected along the way, including two congresspeople, Sean Casten in the 6th district, and also Lauren Underwood in the 14th district. And we are moving forward to protect those seats because they're doing a fantastic job over there. We also endorsed another candidate this year, Marie Newman, in the 3rd district, and we're very happy that she won her primary. We also endorsed Lori Lightfoot, and living in Chicago, we're very proud of the job that she's doing with J.B. Pritzker to keep us safe. Today, we're here because we are not too far from Election Day, less than 6 months, maybe about 24 Thursdays left. And we know that our legislators went back to Springfield, and there was a bill on the table around vote by mail. So we have two speakers that are going to talk about what's happened in Springfield today. And this is an issue that we feel very strongly about. I'm happy to say that I wrote to my representative, Senator Duckworth, and she wrote me back. And she said that, well, firstly, she wrote me back and she sent me a letter through the United States Postal Service. She says that she thanks me. She thanks me for taking the time to make her aware of my concerns about election security. She says that COVID-19 is a public health crisis, and it underscores the importance of effective pandemic preparedness and response planning. And we know that Congress has to support us by making wise investments in critical infrastructure at the federal, state, and local levels to improve the flexibility and resiliency of our election systems. And this includes expanding secure vote by mail options and improving the efficiency of voter registration procedures. So she's very interested in making sure that vote by mail options are available in Illinois. She points to other states like Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Hawaii, and Washington in conducting their elections entirely by mail. So we also know that she joined in with her colleagues in urging congressional leadership to include an additional $3.6 billion in election system funding in the next COVID-19 relief legislation to help state and local governments expand vote by mail options, expand early voting, and enhance election security. So this will also help states bolster in-person voting operations and poll worker training to make sure that appropriate precautions and social distancing practices are in place to protect individuals who must physically visit a polling place to cast a ballot. So this is all great, but we know what happens, that a lot of this happens at the very, very local level. I'm going to move on. I would love to introduce you to our two speakers today. We have Jay Young, who is the Executive Director for Common Cause Illinois. He is responsible for tracking, analyzing, building campaigns around legislation on issues concerning open governance and money in politics. Before joining Common Cause, Jay served as an administrator for a statewide early childhood program and worked at the state level with public and private stakeholders to develop supports for Illinois children and families with the greatest needs. Selected as one of the state's thought leaders in building and strengthening local community collaborations, Jay has traveled all over Illinois to talk to families who no longer feel that they have a voice. Jay completed his undergraduate studies at Duke University and went on to receive a Master of Public Policy from the University of Chicago. He also holds a law degree from the University of Virginia and has over a decade of experience working as an attorney. We welcome Jay Young. We also welcome Rose Colicchino. Rose has been a member of Indivisible since 2016. She is the election security lead for Indivisible Illinois, and earlier this year organized and participated in a nationwide rally that helped secure $250 million in election security funding prior to the 2020 election. Rose has also developed an Indivisible 2020 plan concentrating on the critical swing states of Wisconsin and Michigan with a focus on Wisconsin, working closely with Wisconsin Democrats and swing left Wisconsin. Rose has a BA in political science and an MBA with a concentration in marketing. We welcome both of you here today. I would love to hand the mic over to Jay Young. I would love to know what your story is and what brought you here, and then let's tie it into the moment that we're in. Thanks, Jay.
Sure. Thanks, Leni. Thanks, Rose. Thank you to all of you that are joining us tonight. So number one, every time somebody reads my bio, I always feel like I need to, I have huge amounts of debt. That's all. Every time you read, it just reminds me of my student loan debt. So my story. So as was suggested, I had a life before I was at Common Cause. I was a lawyer for a little over a decade, but that wasn't really what I ever wanted to be when I grew up. I started out when I was in high school, living in a suburb of DC, and I started working summers at a group home in just off of Howard University's campus. And I continued to work there actually all through college. I really thought I wanted to be a social worker, a therapist. I knew that I cared deeply about children and family in crisis. And I just, there's so many people that want to engage in the lives of these children and think they know best. There's the cops, there's the social workers, there's the teachers, there's the bio parents. There's so many people. And I thought, my naive 18-year-old self thought, one day I'm going to start a nonprofit someday, and I'm going to help all these people get, together. And but I thought I need to go to law school so that they couldn't tell me I didn't know what I was talking about, and I needed to go to policy school so they couldn't tell me I didn't know what I was talking about. And along the way, I accumulated all that student loan debt that I mentioned before. That's still why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm a little bit further removed. You know, these days I work on issues like election protection and money in politics and the census. And in some ways, I'm not in neighborhoods anymore, training communities to sort of come together to solve problems for themselves. Um, but I'm trying to help solve the problem. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're in, um, you know, West Englewood, or you're in North Chicago, or you're in Aurora, or you're in Cahokia, you're in Danville. There's always people are saying they don't listen to me, and the they is sometimes their boss, sometimes it's their teachers, oftentimes it's their leaders in Springfield, their leaders in DC. And so I came to Common Cause about 4.5 years ago as the policy guy, to help figure out a way to make the nonpartisan stuff that Common Cause does sexy. It's for those that don't know Common Cause, we're 50 years old this year. Nonpartisan, uh, good government folks. I think we were actually started by a Republican. Uh, he was in the Johnson administration and felt that everybody was organized but the people. So started with about 400 members. Today, we've got 1.5 million nationwide, about 35,000 members here in Illinois. Um, in Illinois, we work since I think we've been around. We've always had a money in politics campaign and a voting rights campaign. Um, Before the world fell apart, the zombie apocalypse started. I was up to my eyeballs in the census. I chair the statewide table that focuses on the policy issues associated with the census. For those of you who haven't yet filled out your census form, no time like the present. Um, but we were working on ethics reforms. We were working on, we sued the state recently with respect to its failure to implement automatic voter registration. Those were the kind of issues that I thought I was going to be working on. And then March 17th was our primary. Common Cause regularly partners with the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights to do a election protection program. And we saw a state in a lot of ways rise to the occasions. There were a lot of really good things that happened, but there were far too many bad things that happened. There were polling places that were closed because election workers weren't showing up out of fear for their health. There were long lines, people packed into church basements. Polling places were shut down and people didn't know where to go. And that story was, I actually, near the end of the day, we actually hopped on the phone and did some EP work in other states around the country, and we were hearing a lot of those same things. In addition to the census stuff that I do, I'm also the chair of a coalition called Just Democracy Illinois. Just Democracy Illinois is comprised of the steering committee. It's got about 40 so members at this point. The steering committee includes organizations like Illinois PIRG and ICER, the Chicago Lawyers Committee, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Chicago Votes, and Change Illinois, as well as my organization. And that's the group that has been the platform for issues like same-day registration, for expansion of online voting, online registration, and so forth. And so I had agreed to take on the chair role back in March, when I really thought the focus was going to be our suit against the state around AVR. And really what it has become is a almost laser-like focus on our upcoming election. There is so much that is at stake right now. I frequently had said that 2016 was the most consequential election that I'd see in my lifetime, but 2020 absolutely is. 2020 is the year where the country has to decide, are we going to re-up for more of this madness? And so it was already going to be a big year. There were already concerns about how things were going to work. And now we're in a situation where it's going to be really hard to do GOTV work. It's going to be really hard to recruit folks to work in the polls. We don't know what November is going to look like. And so from a very early period, I started talking to my counterparts, the other executive directors in Common Cause around the country, to think about best practices, see what's worked from folks in, say, Colorado and California, states where they have vote by mail. Learning that vote by mail, which I will admit, when this thing started, I was a bit of a skeptic, not because I didn't think I wanted to give folks access to the ballot. It was just that I didn't know that all parts of Illinois, all parts of Chicago looked like Colorado. And I just wanted to know how things would work together. I just had questions. As long as safe in-person voting was available, 100% on board. And so in our coalition, that has been sort of where we've started from. We've started from the point of making sure that whatever the system comes, and just before we got on this call, and I'll turn real quick to a bill that's moving right now down in Springfield is likely going to be passed on a party line vote tomorrow into law around elections issues for 2020. But our focus has been, is now, and will continue to be making sure that not only are there resources in place to conduct a fair election, to let everybody vote who wishes to, but to make sure that the system really works for as broad of a cross-section of Illinois as we possibly can. Again, I sort of wear, because of my gig right now, I wear the nonpartisan hat. And so I try to be very careful about how I talk about these things. But again, I want to stress, this is the most important election that we may well see in our lives. And we really need to sort of engage on that. I can go into details, Leni, but I don't know if you want to save that to questions about the legislation in that month.
It would be great if you could just, because folks are maybe tuning in and they did not know that there was a bill
Sure.
up. So if you could give a little bit of background, that would be great.
Sure. So as soon as this crisis began, I think there was a lot of energy in the Illinois Senate around a proposal being spearheaded by Senator Julie Morrison to send a ballot to every registered voter in Illinois. There was a lot of support, I think, for that. I think it is, I don't think I'm breaking any confidences to say that Speaker Madigan did not feel that way. There was no interest coming out of House leadership in sending a ballot to every voter in the state. I was told very early on that ballots to every voter was off the table. I heard it about a month ago. Inside our coalition, we had a range of folks ranging from very, very adamant that all voters should get a ballot to some folks who, were worried about groups like first-time voters or folks with limited English proficiency, or folks, who maybe say blind, who might need a ballot in Braille, and what would that look like? It's challenging, as you might guess, to sort of manage kind of that big tent kind of thing with all these different approaches. And my coalition actually wasn't able to reach a consensus on what that first touch with voters would be. I can tell you from Common Cause's perspective, we were definitely in the, send every voter a ballot camp. I think Senator Biss, in one of my conversations with him, said, made an argument that I don't know how you refute, which is, if November is bad and we didn't try to send people ballots, like how are we going to look ourselves in the mirror? Like, forget everything else. Like that to me was sort of already dispositive, but trying to be as, understanding as possible as to what was actually going to happen. What we found was that what we expected was what we got, which was a bill that was dropped on the day before the legislators went back to session. Right now, we're ending day 2 of a 3-day special session to focus on a number of COVID-19 related issues in Springfield. We were told that the substance of that bill was likely not to change very much from what was originally. It was originally proposed by the House Dem Women. The caucus originally put up the proposals, and it includes a number of things, which would be important for everybody to know. First off, everybody who either voted since 2018 or requested a ballot, a vote by mail ballot since 2018, will receive not a ballot, an application to request a ballot in the mail. You'll get that from your local election authority. And if you don't return it, you'll get up to 3 touches, 3 follow-up responses coming out of the Secretary of State's office to remind you that you've gotten your ballot and to explain how to go ahead and submit that. That's a big picture thing. Another big item on the list is that Election Day will be a state holiday. It's already a federal holiday, but by making it a state holiday, it means that the schools would be closed. It would mean that state workers would be able to get off and be able to vote, but it also frees up those schools as potential polling places, which has been a source of friction with the clerks, as it's getting harder and harder to use schools as polling places. That's a big ticket item. There will be the State Board of Elections has to create a universal portal that would allow new voters to apply online to request a vote by mail ballot. You fill out your information on the State Board of Elections website. They send that information to your local clerks, who would then go ahead and send you that that ballot. One thing that I mentioned, that everybody who voted or registered to vote, or requested a ballot by mail since 2018 is going to get that mailed application automatically. If you register to vote after the effective date of this bill that I expect to pass tomorrow, and you register online, you can check a little box and they'll automatically just send you a ballot. So in other words, your registration would count as an application. There are a number of other provisions to improve education around vote by mail that will be going out. There are provisions that will make it easier for, right now, in certain circumstances, kids as young as 16 can serve as election judges. They're going to make it easier for folks to serve as election judges, for youth to serve as election judges. If you are currently on unemployment, the money that you would receive as an election judge wouldn't count against you. So trying to figure out ways to recruit folks to avoid that problem I mentioned before, where polling places were closed. And then there's some other provisions around the making it easier for local clerks to staff up and handle what is expected to be a much larger population seeking to either early vote or to request a ballot by mail. One thing that I haven't talked about in all of this is how we pay for all of this, which is from a state government perspective, particularly this state government, which is a pretty big deal. There's some federal money that the states got from the last Corona relief package. There's an additional money additional federal money, that's about $13 million, 14-ish almost million from the last COVID package. If we also include some of this other bucket of money from, it's called the Help America Vote Act, we could get as much as $30 million. $30 million seems like a lot of money, but we have 108 election authorities around the state. And regardless of what we all wish, there's going to be a lot of flexibility given to those election authorities to figure out what voting will actually look like in the state of Illinois. Some of those clerk's offices like Cook County or the city of Chicago have a lot of resources and they're going to be well equipped to handle it, but there's some downstate counties that are going to need a lot more support. They don't have, scanners and so forth. And so the cost, I was listening before I got on this call to the debate, which is very partisan, as you might imagine. Everything in Springfield is very partisan. But listening to the debate around this bill, and it is, at least from the Republicans' perspective, very much focused on the cost. So a big part of our advocacy is not just around making sure that everybody's going to be aware of the applications process, making sure that we have safe in-person voting, making sure that there's money to pay for it, are really some of the big buckets of things that we are focused on. But again, it's, I want to make sure this works really for everybody. So I don't know. I feel like I've rambled. Absolutely. And maybe now is a good time to stop.
This is great. Thank you. I think that it's important to just say, Indivisibles have come together and we are learning as we go. But one thing is for certain, that we believe that every vote should count. Everyone who is a registered voter, we believe, should be able to vote in the way that they want to. And this should be a question not only in the time of a pandemic, but before every election. So how is it that we are preparing for our elections now, and what does that look like? We are not at those tables. We rely on groups like yours to advocate for us. And but we do have some voice in this, which is why I would love to hear from Rose at this time to keep us updated on the work that she's been doing for the last couple of years. Rose, will you just come on and tell us your story and how you came to be in Indivisible?
Most definitely, and good evening to you. Good evening to everybody online. I am Rose Colosino, Election Security, Indivisible, Illinois. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to say what an honor it is to be on the virtual stage with both of you. I'm big fans of both of yours. So just so thrilled to be here and coalescing and working together. So I will also be speaking about expanding the vote by mail opportunities in Illinois. And I want to take a step back, if I could, and just remind ourselves and everybody of the really big picture that we all most definitely agree. So as US citizens, we are constitutionally guaranteed the right to vote, one person, one vote. Can't forget that. We should not have to risk our health and safety, as we unfortunately had to do on March 17th in Illinois, and as our neighbors did in Wisconsin in April 7th. We must start organizing now, as Jay has so well noted, to prepare. There's just so much to do. Even with normal elections, it's a struggle to get poll watchers and the right kind of supplies. So yeah, there's a lot to do coming forward. We must demand that our officials protect our right to vote amid this global pandemic. And I'm not just talking about Illinois, I'm talking about the whole country. So I try to turn to some of the folks that provide guidance. So what happens if we don't act with expediency? Here's a quote from the president of the very respected Brennan Center, along with Common Cause. There's Brennan Center. This is from Michael A. Waldman, if I could. Unless we want to operate under the assumption that this will all go away, we have to prepare. If we as a country don't take action, there could be 50 Wisconsins in November, end quote. And I think some time has passed. I think a lot of the eyes were on Wisconsin, And I just want to bring us back to that, bring us back to the photos and the videos. And some of us from Indivisible did have a frontline experience there. Another person I'm a fan of is Ben Wickler. So he is the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Wisconsin offers, what he is telling us, a nightmarish vision of what the whole country could see in the fall. Voters struggling to balance democracy with public health. Yes, I'm trying to scare everybody into action here. So again, there were quite a few of us from Indivisible that had the opportunity to get out the vote for Wisconsin folks for various elections, as well as being on the hotline, which I have to say was run spectacularly by my friends from the Wisconsin Voter Protection Hotline. And we had the chance to talk to these voters. Their stories are sort of seared in my soul, and I fight for them, as I know all of you do, and all of the voters in Illinois too. So I am going to touch base with both the state activity and the national activity. So really, as Jay mentioned, the first step is in educating ourselves. And I have to say, Jay, you're not the first Common Cause person I've made a presentation with. I've had the great fortune to work with your outreach manager. In fact, I think I speak to Tyler St. Clair probably more than I speak to some Indivisible people, except maybe Leni. He's fantastic, and we have partnered, and we have supported each other. And I think we have both felt that voter education is just so critical. No matter what the nuances are and what we might agree with and not agree with, I think we are all citizens of this state and this country, and we have to get the word out. We have to get the word out to the people that maybe aren't watching MSNBC like I am and listening to NPR and and all of that. What are the kids listening to? Snapchat, Leni, Instagram? I don't know. We have to get the word out. So I do want to tell you that our presentation, I'm happy to say, and a lot of it is due to Tyler's very hard work, has been well received. We've given a half a dozen presentations together and separately. We have one coming up. We'll be talking to Tyler tomorrow. We have one coming up in Champaign and Brandon. We can now present everywhere with all these Zoom calls. So I want to say that most definitely vote by mail does require some reform. People tell me often, well, we have it in Illinois. Yes, I understand, but I think it could most definitely be improved. I want to speak to now, I think they were both men. I'm going to speak to two women that I admire highly. I want to talk about what Stacey Abrams is saying and what Elizabeth Warren is saying. Where they lead, I follow, basically. So they are telling us what they suggest is to expand vote by mail by sending all registered voters a postage paid ballot and establishing safeguards to protect voters. Yes. Also, they are telling us, number two, extend early in-person voting to make it easier for more people to vote. Jay, I don't know if you remember, but a while ago we were on a conference call and you really educated me about equity. And then I was educated again by the Wisconsin voters, understanding that, it's not as easy as it is for me to either ask for an application or get a ballot. We need to maintain equity and we need to maintain the polling places. So I think in no way are any of us saying closing down all the polling places. We need to expand online and same-day voter registration. And I'm talking wide, in Illinois and across the country. This is critical. Take measures to protect the health of voters and poll workers. I've got a lot of stories from Wisconsin. They really did a Herculean job there, but they were competing with the hospitals for PPE and sanitation equipment. We can't have that. And I certainly don't think that any of us are ready for November yet. We need to basically do what Tyler and I have been doing, conduct voter education campaigns and continue doing that until November and then beyond November. So what is overall the status of states with vote by mail? And Jay touched on some of this. Illinois doesn't have to be a pioneer. Multiple states already have expanded vote by mail. Just want to name them again because there are pioneers and our heroes. Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Utah, Washington. They conduct their elections almost entirely by mail, offering successful models. And I have to say that Washington did really well when they were, I don't know where they are right now with the pandemic, but when they were in the midst of the pandemic, they actually had pretty good numbers. And I think it's because they had vote by mail. I'm not saying that this happens overnight, but it's definitely the North Star that we have to aspire for. In 2016, more than 23% of voters cast ballots by mail. Vote by mail improves voter turnout. States that allowed expanded vote by mail on average a 15.5 percentage points higher turnaround rate than states that did not. So I think that's what we all want. We want more registered voters to have the opportunity to vote. It doesn't need to be the haves and the have-nots. It has to be everybody. So their needs have to be prioritized, and let what happened during the primary in Illinois and Wisconsin serve as bellwethers for us. And I have to say, I have been working quite a bit in Wisconsin because, sorry, we are somewhat partisan, but we do want to turn Wisconsin blue, and Illinois is already kind of blue. So the deal is that Illinois is kind of a place where people want to come. So we are in Cook County, at least, the second largest jurisdiction in the country next to LA. And actually in a prior life, and this, I mean, prior to March, we were talking about trying to encourage people to do hand-marked paper ballots and save assisted devices for people with disabilities. And we were really pushing audits. Our score's really low in Illinois for audits. So we were happily doing that until, again, like you said, Jay, March happened. So we had to switch gears. And I can't tell you that I was always fanatical about vote by mail. I was pushing that other stuff, but certainly it doesn't make sense. Right now we have to be agile. We have to pivot to push hand-marked paper ballots at polling places because, the virus. So we think that as we move forward, that Illinois can be a model for other places. And I think we all have to keep in mind, and I keep reiterating every presentation that we make, because I think when I get out of my ears are shrinking, nothing else, but my ears are shrinking here. So I think that sometimes I am in a bubble, and I don't know if other people realize that, yes, the virus may wane and abate during the summer. However, it is quite possible that it comes back with a vengeance. I hope to God it doesn't, but it's possible. And if it does, we have to prepare. And along with that, we have the flu. So I think that's why there is all the activity that there is. So this is a catchphrase I ask everybody to pay attention to and maybe look it up. It's hashtag VirusFreeVotingIllinois. There was a initiative on social media for virus-free voting across the country. And we have a special one, the first state in the nation to join forces with virus-free voting. We have a hashtag VirusFreeVotingIllinois. So please look it up. All right, so what's happening now? Jay, thanks. You touched on a lot of this. I might just amplify some of the points that you made. I was getting, as we do in this world, I was getting texts right before I came on. And as of 6:46, as Jay alluded to, the Illinois House voted 72-43 to expand vote by mail program. And that advances to the Senate, like Jay said, probably tomorrow, and it will probably be voted on. Yes, all very, very good. Moving in the right direction, possibly not exactly the way Indivisible Illinois wanted it to be, but we're moving there slowly but surely. So here are some main points, and I just want to maybe amplify some things Jay said, and maybe just pick out a couple of things that were mentioned. So it's basically about this amendment. This House Amendment 5 would be effective only for the 2020 general election. I just want to point that out. So it repeals automatically on January the 1st, 2021. I also want to point out some particulars. It is a subset that would be receiving the application. So it would be any voter who voted early, in person, or by mail in the 2018 general election, the 2019 consolidated election, or the 2020 primary, and to anyone who registered or changed her registered address or him, as Jay mentioned. One thing that I actually am concerned about is that HA5 does not require election authorities to supply return postage. An election authority may establish secure collection sites for the postage-free return of mailboxes. That's going to require some education. So I have to tell you, I was most definitely concerned about that. I have heard stories of people that can't afford the postage. So possibly, maybe I'm a dreamer, but I know it's not completely a done deal. I would hope that that could be given some consideration in the Senate. So I want to thank, first of all, the Illinois General Assembly. I want to thank Senator Julie Morrison for their efforts, but I have to say that we at Indivisible, Illinois, we think the bill could go a little further. So we do agree with Common Cause Illinois that every registered voter should automatically get a ballot. We would like to ensure that all jurisdictions include envelopes with prepaid postage. Senate of Illinois. I hope you're listening. And we would love to expand early voting. I know we have a healthy system right now, 2 weeks, but with the pandemic, I would love to see 20 days. We also want a statewide ballot tracking mechanism that must be created to provide transparency. Transparency is very important. Another one of my heroes is Kini Freechild, a public citizen, and she's always drilling transparency. And I'm told, well, we're lucky if we get vote by mail and the way we want it, but I'm gonna fight the good cause until the end. We need transparency. We need to be blasting the audits on the walls of the facilities that have audits. So I should mention that states that have been doing this have faced infinitesimally small amounts of fraud. I didn't listen to the whole thing, Jay, but I listened to, is he a rep or Senator Oberweis saying there was going to be 3 times more voter fraud. I respectfully disagree. I'd like to see his empirical facts on that, and I will stop myself. I have a lot right here, but I timed myself and I don't want to go over. I can come back to this over a question and answer about Oregon. Again, I know Oregon is not Illinois and Portland is not Chicago, but I've got some good argument here for you that I'll save until later. So as always, we want to make clear our mission statement. I told you about particulars, but what's the big picture? The big picture is that we demand safe, secure, and accessible elections to protect the right to vote during the pandemic and beyond. And I know we all agree about that. So there's a lot to do. So no matter what happens with the legislation, we need to all coalesce and we need to work together. We must ensure, as I mentioned, to have enough poll workers, for goodness sake, poll observers and people on the hotline. And I applaud Ami Gandhi, who's a hero with this work on the 866 Our Vote line. I think that woman is going to be very busy. And I also understand from Tyler that Common Cause is building on their voter protection program. And so we've got people, we've got people that are hungry to advocate. So hopefully we can put them to work. Yeah, we need to make sure we have, again, I repeat myself, but it's important, enough PPE and sanitation supplies. Again, I'm thinking of Wisconsin. And my goodness, voters need to be made aware. I think they still aren't aware of how it used to be, right? So now we're talking about all these changes. So we have to make them aware. We need more people doing these voter ed presentations. We also, as you know, I'm an election security nerd. We were on with Ben Joravsky earlier today. He wrote an article about how in 2016, the voter registration clearinghouse, I want to specify that, sometimes confused, but it was the voter clearinghouse of Illinois was hacked into. And so I've been reading about it since 2016 and maybe Ben Joravsky, but when he did his interview on the streets, his unempirical interview, nobody else seemed to know about it. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to fight that disinformation campaign. I know the forces that be, Russia and what have you, are gearing up. And I know, there are going to be some things said about some of our candidates who we believe in very much. So the COVID-19 pandemic is a public health and voting rights crisis that we have to be prepared for. I do, though, want to just switch gears for a second, and I want to talk about some of the federal stuff. And yes, of course, we need money to pay for these things. I am not a Republican, but I get it. I understand. So there is the HEROES Act. We understand there's an uphill battle to get the HEROES Act passed. It's in the House, and I appreciate we are ready from the CARES Act 1. We got that 400 million, and as Jay said, we got about 13 million from that. So we do have that money. So here's the HEROES Act, just a summary, and then I'll conclude. It includes 25 billion for the U.S. Postal Service, and my goodness, we need that. Also 3.6 billion for big election reforms, and just a couple of bullets on the HEROES Act. Nationwide, no excuse absentee voting, ballots mailed to all voters in emergencies, 15 days early voting, free postage, no IDs or witness signatures, talking to you, Wisconsin, about the IDs and the witness signatures, online and election day registration. In closing, I want to highlight that we must also demand transparency, as I said, broken record, and more robust and vigorous post-election audits. You're not going to stop me from saying that. In Illinois and nationwide to ensure confidence in the vote. As we know, in Wisconsin, the election was on the 7th. We didn't find out who the winners were until the 13th. We might have to prepare for that, and we might have to prepare our voters for that, not the, of the minute Twitter, CNN, latest news. We might not get the vote right away. And I can just stand on my platform one more moment. I just want to say our voting rights are entangled in a public health crisis. The US has the most COVID-19 cases and deaths in the world. Shameful. According to the Johns Hopkins University, 2/3 of voters in a new poll said they support vote by mail for the November election. That's 67% of polled registered voters approve of this year's election being held through the mail. And this comes, I'm cited people, this comes from the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. I thank you. That's all I have. Appreciate your time and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Rose, can you just touch on a little bit about the tracking system that you're talking about? I know a lot of folks are very concerned, especially if they're very used to going to the polls on the day of election. Some people look forward to that very much, and maybe that's the reason why they go to the polls, or maybe they go to the polls on election day because they just don't plan their day, and then they realize, oh, today is the day to vote, and that's the reason why they're there. And some people say, you know, I've never wanted to vote by mail because I just don't trust it. Can you talk about the tracking system a little bit that you envision?
Yeah, and let me describe it to the best that I can with words, but I ask everyone who's curious to take a look at Wisconsin. You know, there are some things, I've been saying this and that, but there are some things that Wisconsin does better than us. And that's this tracking mechanism. So they have something called myvote.y.gov. I should know that. Yeah, but take a look at it, because what you can do is track when you requested, in their case, the application. Then they can also find out when the clerk's office sent it to them. And that was very helpful to us on the hotline, because we were able to see and comfort the voter and tell them they did everything right. The clerks were just, you know, overburdened. The rates were usually 10%, and I think probably similar in Illinois, it went to 80% for absentee ballots. And some of the ballots didn't come in for the voter until the next day after the election. So this tracking mechanism is a great tool for you. It's like Federal Express, for lack of a better analogy, to tell you where your application is or where your ballot is, and give you some confidence and that you did everything right. And then if you have some complaints also, you have that information before you end. I really think it's a matter of transparency. I think the more open we have things, the better. I am aware that various jurisdictions in Illinois do it better than others, but I am not aware, and we've been working on this for what, 2 whole months now, I'm not aware of any kind of Illinois universal state mechanism. So if there's any chance, Senate, Illinois, we can make some changes. We are told that is not exorbitant fee to do this. We have folks that have implemented this in other states, and it's not off the board expensive.
Thanks, Rose. I want to ask Jay, if you could. We're going to go around to Jay and then back to Rose, and then we're 10 minutes before the hour. But I wanted to point out that, you know, words matter. So the words that we use are going to be super important, especially when we're fighting against disinformation out there and confusion. People believe that clear is kind. So when we are talking about vote by mail, Jay, what's the difference between vote by mail and an absentee ballot, applying for an absentee ballot?
Sure. So I would tend to agree, and I appreciate the question. Vote by mail systems can mean, it has become a meaning that that's taking on a number of different systems. There are some places where, in some states where all elections, Colorado is a good example, where vote by mail is sort of the standard for how people expect to vote. And so the process is really sort of set up and designed around not just people getting the mail, but having flexibility to respond in a way that makes them the most comfortable. They have voting centers where you can come and bring your ballot. As Rose points out, there are drop boxes, which are all over the place. They're like mailboxes used to be, you know, so it's to be as convenient as you possibly can. And I certainly would encourage folks to check out groups like Vote at Home and others who are sort of the premier voices on that. Here in Illinois, we have a system that is designed to allow a little bit of flexibility for voters who don't think that they're going to be able to make it to the polls. It's not a uniform program. It certainly isn't as broad-based as, you know, sort of what I'm describing in some of these other jurisdictions, Colorado, LA, et cetera, Oregon. It's instead set up, and again, just, I don't want to go too much in the weeds, but there's a question about what kind of state you are. Many places let you have an absentee ballot. Say I'm going to be I'm in the Army and I'm going to be posted overseas. Some people will say, well, you kind of have an excuse for that. In Illinois, we're known as what is called a no excuse state, which means that we can seek a absentee ballot without really having to give that justification for why we really need that ballot. I can say that I voted by mail, in quotes, from my bed in the primary. And it was a extremely easy experience. Cook County did provide that postage. So all I had to do was drop it back in the envelope and stick it in the mail. Had I lived in Will County, it would not have been as uniform. The postage was not included. I would have had to come out of pocket with a stamp, which, one, that's just hard because who has a stamp these days? But besides that, for a lot of people, that might well be a deal breaker. It may well be an added cost that when a budget is tight, et cetera. So vote by mail in the larger sense. And I want to be careful because you're not just going to hear a lot of advocates online or in other places talking generally about vote by mail. So you need to make sure you understand what systems they're talking about. But I'm also personally very concerned about being right here in Illinois, because I have heard several legislators and other stakeholders talk about what is currently being proposed as a quote unquote vote by mail system. And I'm not sure I would say that's where we are. We are getting, what we're talking about is expanding access to the no excuse absentee ballot. That's really what the bill that's being considered here. Now that's going to be good. That's going to definitely make it safer for folks to vote, but it is not a true vote by mail system.
Thanks, Jay. And then Rose, you keep saying that the bill just does not go far enough. Can you just recap that one more time?
Yeah, we most definitely are still of the opinion that it should be a ballot that goes to every registered voter with prepaid postage for the return envelope. We would like to see expanded early voting because we don't want to see those long lines without some of the social distancing and masks that we saw in Wisconsin and elsewhere. It's not only Wisconsin. And also the tracking mechanism for transparency, for confidence for the voter. And we just feel that that would make this so much more of a better bill.
I would agree.
Can you go? Yes, thank you. And then Rose, can you go over, since we're kind of running out of time. So first I wanted to go over the actions that we could take. And then I want to close out by just recapping how people can stay in touch with both Jay at Common Cause and to keep track of what's going on with Just Democracy and then also with Indivisible. So Rose, can you give us some actions to take?
Yes, and we've started these probably almost 2 months ago, and I appreciate the whole Indivisible team that's been on this. We have been making phone calls to decision makers, and I know the bill's out there. I think it could be improved. So I just asked Indivisible and others to continue making those same phone calls. Also, we are on social media, and easy, instead of giving you an URL for the phone banks, you can just take a look at hashtag VirusFreeVotingIllinois. You'll see some really spectacular graphics that we are thankful our Indivisible friends in California put together for us. We're a big, huge network. And through phone banks and through social media and through emails, we just ask that you do reach out to the decision makers, your state rep, your state senator, decision makers in the House, decision makers in the Senate. I don't know if they have to reconvene after it goes to the Senate. I'm not expert parliamentarian, but yeah, let's keep fighting. But once it is decided upon, I look forward to all working together, working on voter education and making sure that we have the safest, most secure, accessible election possible in November. And I'm still confident that if we start now, we'll be able to get it done. When we fight, we win.
That's right. And then Jay, tell us how we can keep in touch with you and also all the work that you're doing right now in Illinois.
Sure. So I guess I would also just follow up on what Rose just said. When we fight, we win. And if we don't fight, we're absolutely going to lose. That's something that I can guarantee. The other thing that I wanted to flag that I think Rose said that is super important and we all need to keep in mind is that all this bill that we've been talking about, these changes that we were talking about for the November 2020 election, as Rose pointed out, they are temporary. My end goal in this is what comes next, how we build for the future so that the next time we're in a crisis, we're not all scrambling, trying to build a plane while we're flying it, and that we have the systems in place, again, that are designed to protect votes. Social media is obviously what everybody's on now. Everything's digital these days. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like at Impact Officer. Common Cause IL is the organization that I'm privileged to run. And of course, we're part of Common Cause more broadly, and that's easy enough to get to. Just Democracy, the coalition that I talked about, the nonpartisan democracy coalition, that's just at Just Democracy IL on Twitter. And I think both Common Cause, Just Democracy, I believe also have a Facebook page. Actually, I'm not positive about Just Democracy. I think that one might have died. But I would expect that you were going to hear quite a bit more being pushed out on any number of channels, media, social media, you name it. We need to be out there doing this education. There's going to be all sorts, and I'm sure Rose is going to keep you guys with your calendars filled with actions that need to be taken. But we need to be targeting the State Board of Elections and letting them know that they need to spend the money on the systems that we need to secure our elections. We need to be picking up the phone tonight, tomorrow morning, and talking to your legislators and letting them know what you need to see in this bill. But the main people we need to be talking to are not just our family and neighbors about the needs, the needs of for like election judges and that sort of thing. We also need to be talking to folks who, if you have contacts in clerk's offices, they are going to be the ones that are holding all the cards in this process. So if you don't know your clerk, it's time to beat them. So I'll stop there.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you, Jay, for reminding us of that. So in Illinois, there are 108 election authorities, I believe, and Chicago City is different from the suburban Cook County. Suburban Cook County is leading the way. Right now, we would love Chicago to step up. We believe that every vote in Illinois counts, and we don't know the resources that each of these election authority officials have. I feel for the people who are actually going to be working at the polls, and it's going to come to them. So we have to think on, how does election day look? How do we want it to look? We want everybody to be able to go to the polls safely and not have long lines. But now in the midst of this pandemic, what are we doing to prepare for that? What are we doing? You've heard from Rose, you've heard from Jay today. We are so thankful for you. You're both part of coalitions that are absolutely vital for us to keep feeding so that we could keep building a broad coalition, because as you know, systems that are in place for a very long time, people get a bit lazy. People stop paying attention. People don't come out to vote because it's not really their place, or that it's too complicated, or politics, they don't like it. But for us, we believe each of our voices count. We believe that we should be able to be heard. We want to bring everybody in with us. We are individuals here, and we believe that this kind of conversation needs to happen not only here at Indivisible Illinois on Facebook, but with our own family members and our friends and our networks, and on with our election officials and our election authorities. And then as long as we're all pointing in the same direction and moving in the same direction and not staying still, and if we fight, we will win. So I want to thank you both for being here, and please keep in touch, and we'll see you next week, next Thursday at 7 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Leni. Thanks, everybody.